Interesting times in Philippine politics. Let's discuss or dissect all these developments further with Professor Aries Arugay, Chairperson of UP's Political Science Department. Good evening, Prof, and welcome to the big story. One is calling for a bloodbath, while the other is extending a hand of reconciliation. What do we make of this?
It reveals where the positions of our top two leaders are coming from, where they're coming from. But I do think the extension of reconciliation by the president is really interesting, because it might mean that, at least on his end, that he really wants to do good on, let's remember, the campaign promise and the premise of which they both ran in 2022, and that's unity. Unfortunately, that's a basic campaign promise that has become unfulfilled. However, reconciliation cannot be one way, and therefore, it's also quite interesting that the vice president has an opposite view and seems to be has not changed her stance that this war between Marcos and Duterte should continue, even if the midterm elections are already over.
How can the president prove that he's sincere, and I mean, how can this happen?
Well, sincerity on his part might mean that there might be pronouncements that would be less reactionary, because it seems like Vice President Sara Duterte has no intention of not doubling down on the narrative that she's being persecuted, not only by Marcos's allies, but Marcos himself. So I think on the part of Marcos Jr., is to pursue lines of mutual interest or cooperation. But to tell you the truth, says at the moment, it seems very unlikely, because the base itself is at the moment is on the mode that there's really this polarization, this division in the country that will prevail, even if we've had elections.
Does this show weakness on the part of the president? It may be sobering for him. The results of the elections make him practically a lame duck president.
Right. Well, what we've heard from the president is at least a very proactive measure. We just don't know the details of how he's gonna be able to accomplish it. But I think President Marcos has realized, or is starting to realize, that he needs to do something for his last remaining years in office. And anything that he has done before, any approach or any kind of strategy that he has implemented, has not really bear fruit, did not really result to concrete outcomes, because his popularity numbers are down. On the other hand, the Duterte base has mobilized and delivered for some of the endorsed candidates of former President Duterte and Vice President Sara Duterte.
What do you make of his podcast? Well, podcast number 1 on the 3rd year of your of office looks strange.
Indeed, especially for let's remember, when he campaigned for the presidency, he actually had a very active, if I'm not mistaken, a YouTube channel. But this is very consistent with the very curated, very polished approach of Marcos Jr. If you know, it was recorded live, but it's not actually live. Compare it with the ambush interviews and off-the-cuff remarks, the rhetorical strategy of Vice President Duterte. As someone who has been monitoring the unraveling of this alliance, seems like they're treading two different communication or rhetorical strategies at the moment.
Professor Aries, this all comes in the context of last week. We heard Alianza campaign manager Toby Tiangco going on so many media interviews, basically saying the same thing. Basically, nilalaglag nila yung impeachment. And then today, nagyari to nga, episode 1. I think we have to talk about this pronouncement of extending an olive branch within the context of ang dami ring gumugulong. And Congressman Tiangco has already said a lot of things. Do you think this is all kind of like a coordinated kind of messaging? Do you think they're changing their messaging finally?
Right. From the point of view of political strategy, any attempt to have plausible deniability by the executive on the impeachment process, I think it's very smart because just in case if the impeachment trial's outcome is an acquittal, then the Marcos Jr. Presidency and administration will say, oh, we have nothing to do with that. Wala kaming kinalaman dyan kasi sinabi na namin na ayaw namin yan. But on the other hand, if the outcome results in conviction, then it's something that would, I mean, any political strategist would say would benefit the current administration given the very combative nature of the relationship between our top two leaders.
Well, Professor, as early as now, we're already hearing rumors of possible leadership shakeups for the 20th Congress. Let's start with the upper chamber. Do you think Senate President Cheese Escudero will still enjoy majority support in the next Congress?
Right. Normally, we hear this this buzz about Senate leadership once there'll be a new Congress, right? Because they'll still reconvene in early June, and we'll spend a bit more time before the new Congress opens sometime in July. But we're hearing as soon as the senators were proclaimed, we're already hearing buzz about leadership changes, and therefore it seems like the probability of a Senate leadership is looming because let's remember the outcome of the Senate elections did not really favor the current administration majority in the Senate. So you have some changes in the numbers. The entry of Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Senator Bam Aquino, the entry of, depending on who's counting, 4 to 5 Duterte-endorsed candidates. That's more than half of the 12 seats that were up for grabs in last week's election. So it's very plausible that the administration majority of the past 3 years in the Senate will not hold.
What about in the lower house? Last week, we also heard of an event in Shangri-La Fort where there was supposedly an event of Lakas CMD and a lot of the congressmen pledged support to the House Speaker, Martin Romualdez. Do you think he's going to be able to hold, given that he does still have a majority?
Right. It's trickier in the House because the Speaker is a direct first cousin of the President, and therefore is an extension of the Marcos dynasty in politics, if you include the Romualdezes. And historically, the Speaker, with very few exceptions, the Speaker, the House of Representatives, I mean, has always been controlled by the incumbent administration compared to the Senate. But I do think the idea that there could be a challenge to Speaker Romualdez might stem in the fact that there might be allies of the president or maybe people close to him politically who might want to say that maybe in your last 3 years you might want there might be a different direction, a different approach, and different strategy on things because it seems like in the first half that that the administration had been severely challenged. Many of its campaign promises remain to be not so fulfilled, and its popularity as president and as an administration it's been declining. So any kind of leadership challenge in the House might signal that the administration might want a different approach in policymaking and in its relationship with the legislature.
But in the end, the president will have influence over whoever will sit there, right?
In the House, yes, definitely. In the Senate, there seems to be historically a bit more relative autonomy between the way the senators decide, and this is why it's kind of indicative that a lot of them are emphasizing the term "we must be an independent Senate,"
Okay.
and that we might read a little bit more on if a majority of the senators are expressing this sentiment. But in the House, historically and institutionally, the president holds a lot of sway.
So in the Senate, who do you think it could be? We've only been hearing Tito Soto, former Senate President. He's expressed pretty much the same thing, that he is willing, if he has the numbers. Fearless forecast, Prof.
Right. Well, if you're, let's say if you're a sitting senator, and especially if you won the election, let's talk about the Duterte endorsed candidates. Your option is to either declare yourself in the minority, and most likely you'll join the ranks of the current minority, Senator Risa Ontiveros, will likely be joined by Senator Bam Aquino and Senator Pangilinan. The implication of that is that you might lose your committee chairmanship. So let's remember that the Senate's dynamic is quite different because, yes, there's a looming impeachment trial of the vice president, but after that, if you're a sitting senator, you have to think about, what about my committee chairmanships? How am I able to really influence policymaking and lawmaking if being in the minority will mean I lose this chairmanship? So I think the search will be for a candidate or for a senator that will be seen as a consensus between the Marcos side and even perhaps the Duterte side. And Senator Soto is a viable candidate because he served as Senate President during the Duterte administration, and at the same time, is a member of the Alianza Sling.
Okay.
Professor, just one more question from me. Well, you did mention the looming impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte. Break down the numbers for us. And how do you think these senator judges will be voting? Will they be voting according to their political biases, or will they be voting impartially, objectively? Because we do know this is a sui generis proceeding, right? So it's quite different. But at the same time, they will also be judged by the public on how they decide leading up to 2028. Walk us through that, Professor.
Right, definitely. We've had 2 impeachment trials in our history. One was aborted. The second one was able to complete, although the official in trial was not a president or a vice president, but a Supreme Court Chief Justice. So when people say, and almost everyone say it's a political process, it has something to do with the fact that the members of the jury, the judges, are senators. I mean, in other countries that have impeachment processes, the conviction or acquittal of the impeached official lies in a court, an actual court. In South Korea, it was a constitutional court composed of, if I'm not mistaken, 9 judges. So this is not really a judicial process. But let's also remember that as a impeachment trial, the rules of evidence will be different. So you're correct. While a lot of these senators have loyalties, I mean, in Philippine politics, there are no permanent allies or friends, only permanent interests. And a lot of these senators will think, how will I be judged? Not only the way I vote, but the way I conduct myself as a senator judge. And what about my political ambitions and political interests? Will being overly loyal to the vice president or to the government, what cost will I have to bear? And are those costs something that could compromise my ambitions or my career? So a lot of these senators are going to think about that beyond the evidence. But we must remember, we only have their alliances or perhaps their loyalties in mind. The process will happen and there'll be evidence presented, and this will all be televised. They will be under a microscope, everyone, including perhaps the vice president herself, if the strategy is to make her testify. And finally, that the vice president promised that the impeachment will be the opportunity for her to present her defense. So it's quite interesting. She framed it as a bloodbath when it's supposed to be, the promise that she made is that she will present her innocence in this trial.
Okay, finally, Prof, in our earlier exchange, you mentioned about the difference in the way President Marcos and VP Sara communicate or present themselves to the public. VP Sara has obviously been more subdued, but still uses very sharp words. who's winning the communication? I hate to call it war. Well,
Showdown.
showdown. Yeah, okay. Because before you answer, Prof, because Attorney Claire Castro is speaking for the president when she, answers all of VP Sara or the Duterte allies' comments.
Right. So yeah, I mean, of course, the president has some advantage given that he has the entire Philippine government apparatus to carry out some of the communication strategies and measures. But we must also understand that it's the recipients of these messages, of this rhetoric, that at the end will judge whether they're effective or not. And what we're seeing is that if you notice, Sara Duterte's rhetorical strategy doesn't really fall far from Rodrigo Duterte's rhetorical. So in a way, whatever gains or whatever assessment of we've had of the effectiveness of the Duterte rhetorical strategy of the former president, it seems like Sara Duterte is able to mimic that, and that enables not only the mobilization of the base, but a mobilization of different actors or influencers, bloggers on social media. So we must remember that in this day of social media, it's not only there are intermediaries of these communication strategy, and not only is there a communication war between these two officials, but also a war between their foot soldiers, the influencers.
Correct. Okay, so
So one last question, Prof, very quickly. In the House, babalikan ko lang yung sinabi mo kanina, there are names that are cropping up. There's Albi Benitez of Bacolod, who's, I think, running as an independent. There's also, of course, Toby Tiangco, who is the Alianza campaign manager. He's also known as a loyal congressman, but he is also sort of family by marriage to the president. So who do you think it'll be?
Right. It's quite early to tell. I think at the moment, while we have heard news that it seemed like a sealed deal and that likely the speaker will remain, it's still a few weeks before Congress reconvenes on early June, and if the new Congress. So I wouldn't totally count the possibility that there could still be nung nagkagapangan sa eleksyon, baka nagkakagapangan din sa House at the moment. And therefore, it's so interesting that in Philippine politics at the moment, the most interesting politics does not happen before or during elections, but happens after.
depends kung sinong may magandang promise sa mga congressman. Diba?
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, University of the Philippines Political Science Department Chairperson, Professor Aries Arugay.